He recognized her instantly. But why didn't she say anything? The signs were unmistakable. Seal suddenly felt the guiding energy. Irene thought she had accidentally triggered it. Seal told her he'd been searching everywhere for her, calling her honey. Irene wondered how he could recognize her here in Korea, the country she had lived in during her past life. In that world there were two kinds of gifted individuals, espers and guides. Espers were born with powerful abilities, but suffered from mental instability. Guides had the role of stabilizing these unstable energies. Without timely guidance, an esper could lose control at any moment, just like her husband did in her previous life. People around them shouted, "Evacuate quickly!" Swan knew that as a B-class guide, she couldn't stop an S-class esper who had already lost control, but the thought that he might die compelled her to act without hesitation. She shouted, "Snap out of it!" Then she hugged him and began guiding him. She felt her entire body melting away as she slowly lost consciousness. The painful memories seemed to fade. Then she said, "Seal, maybe you never loved me, but thank you for being by my side." She felt she could finally let go of her feelings for him. "Goodbye, love." On the brink of death, she prayed to God. In her next life, please let her be born into a warm family, meet a man who truly loves her, and live an ordinary life. Back in the present, her mother said, "Irene, wake up. We're about to enter the imperial palace." She asked, "Are we finally going in?" Her father replied that they had been traveling non-stop for 3 days in this cramped carriage. Her brother exclaimed, "Wow, Irene, how can you still look beautiful even after just waking up? Is it because today is the day you become a lady?" They all chatted and laughed. Irene thought, thankfully, it seems God has answered her prayers, allowing her to become the daughter of this harmonious family. However, the peculiar thing is that this place is the world inside a novel she read in her previous life. Is this a romance novel? The female lead is a dimension traveler from Earth who showcases the civilization of her homeland, becomes revered as a saintess, and captures the hearts of the male leads. Today is the day all the young noble ladies and lords are here for their coming-of-age ceremony. Irene and her family had been invited to a grand banquet celebrating the arrival of the saintess in the empire. Basically, it was the moment where all the characters from the novel came together. Irene couldn't help but wonder, would they look anything like she imagined? She remembered reading this novel in her past life for just one reason. One of the supporting male leads had the exact same name and appearance as her ex-husband. Still, that didn't necessarily mean it was really him. So why was she feeling this way? At the banquet hall, her brother asked if she was nervous. Irene admitted, just a little. Then the Crown Prince and Duke Leopard made their entrance. Blonde hair, sky-blue eyes, he had to be the Crown Prince. And behind him stood Duke Seal Leopard. Irene thought, Seal. In her past life, doctors had ranked espers and guides from S to D class. Normally, those of the same rank had the highest compatibility, but she and Seal were an exception. She had been chosen to be his exclusive guide. Irene had been thrilled. She was in love with him after all. So she ignored the signs of his reluctance. Even as time went on and they shared deep moments during guiding sessions, he remained guarded and distant. She always knew he never married her out of love. When her superior told her Seal wanted to marry her, she was so overjoyed she didn't think about anything else. Now, standing there in the present, he still looked just as handsome as she remembered. Then the saintess arrived. Irene was reminded of a painful memory from her past life. Soan yelling at her, warning her that Seal was an S-class, esper. As a B-class guide, Irene wasn't strong enough to handle him. She should have backed off. Back in the present, her brother whispered how mystical and beautiful the saintess looked, but to him, Irene was still the prettiest. She blushed and told him to stop saying such things in public. But inside she thought, what does it matter now? She already died in Korea. That life, and everything in it, was no longer connected to her. That night, During the coming-of-age ceremony, her mother reminded her that the highlight was to pray under the starlit sky when it was at its brightest. So Irene made a wish. She looked up and prayed to the star, thinking, even after 10 years, she still didn't understand why God had brought her into this new life. Even though she had been transported into a fantasy novel, this was the first time Irene truly felt like part of a warm and loving family. All she wanted now was to stay with them and live happily. Her family gathered around and said, "May the goddess's blessing be with you." Later, as they prepared to leave the ceremony, Irene noticed everything followed strict order, just like when they arrived. Ever since the coming-of-age event, she had felt a strange warmth. Was it just the weather? Her dad suddenly asked if there was anything she wanted as a gift for becoming an adult. He'd get her anything. Her brother chimed in, reminding him that she mentioned wanting a bow. Their mother was shocked. Did she say a bow? Everyone looked alarmed. 10 years ago, the original Irene died from asphyxiation in a fire. When this new Irene woke up in her body, the family believed it was a miracle, a divine sign. Ever since then, her mother had been overly protective, constantly worrying about Irene's safety and never allowing her to go out alone. Now, hearing her daughter ask for a weapon, her mother panicked. "Don't even think about getting a bow. What if you get hurt?" But Irene stood her ground. "I'm an adult now. I don't want to just sit here and watch father and brother fight off monsters while I do nothing. I want to stand beside them and truly be part of this family." Her mother, scared of losing her again, refused. Just then, her brother announced that the carriage had arrived. But before they could leave, Irene suddenly collapsed. In her dazed state, she found herself back in the apartment she used to share with Seal. He appeared and gently asked if she was awake. "It's still early. Get more sleep. Wear a turtleneck tomorrow. Eat some ice. It'll help with the fever." The ice felt so refreshing. She asked for more. Seal smiled. "More? Then how about this?" And he kissed her. In that moment, Irene realized this was the kind of affection she had always wished for from him. It was just a dream. And when she woke up, 3 days had already passed. Her mother was in tears, relieved. She explained that Irene had suddenly collapsed from a high fever, and the family didn't know what to do. Thankfully, the Duke, who had witnessed everything, acted fast. He called a doctor and even arranged a portal to get them home safely. Irene couldn't believe it. The Seal from this world had actually helped her. This mysterious fever. The fever Seal experienced that day was known as an awakening fever, a symptom all espers and guides go through before their powers weaken. It was strange because, in the novel, the Empire had no guides, only espers. The Crown Prince and Seal had their first guiding experience when the Saintess arrived from another dimension, and they ended up competing for her attention. But why had she awakened as a guide? Seal thought about the lady and quietly said the Saintess's name before she introduced herself. It felt like he already knew her. More surprising was that the symptoms he witnessed were definitely those of an awakening fever. Not only was there another gifted person in the Empire, but she also seemed to know him. Could this lady be someone who received a divine revelation and came all the way from Korea? The last thing Seal remembered before returning here were the words from his wife at the moment she sacrificed her life for him. "Goodbye, love." He had shouted, "Please, no!" But when he realized she had died, the calm he once had turned into a raging fury, boiling like lava inside. He found himself trapped again in a deep darkness he thought he'd never escape. Then a voice echoed in his mind and heart. "Seek not the shirt of the star, but the true star itself. That is the path you must take for the Empire." So, Seal returned to the Stern Empire, back to a time before he met his wife. About 2 weeks had passed since he traveled back in time. There had to be a divine reason for this, but it no longer mattered to him. Now that the Saintess had arrived, he could return to Korea like before and start over with his wife. There was only one reason he sought out the Saintess, someone he never wanted to get involved with again. He imagined Swan and thought, "It's to cross dimensions and find Swan." She had called out to him and smiled. Seal thought of his wife, his one and only guide. If he could meet her again, he didn't care if he never returned to the Empire. But she wasn't there. Suddenly he started coughing, feeling like his throat was completely blocked. It was a sign that it was time for him to receive guiding. He drank some holy water and thought that if he had experienced Swan's guiding before, the holy water alone would have been enough. At this rate, he might need to receive guiding from the Saintess. Even before reuniting with Swan, Seal found himself inexplicably drawn to a certain lady. She bore an uncanny resemblance to Swan, sharing the same freckle beneath her eye. The butler interrupted his thoughts, announcing the arrival of Lord Aiden's seasonal letter. Seal usually stored these letters away, but this time he requested it be brought to him directly. Reflecting on his younger brother Aiden, Seal recalled how the boy's sensitivity had often been mistaken for mental illness, leading to his confinement in the annex manor. However, after encountering various espers in Korea, Seal realized that Aiden's symptoms were indicative of psychic abilities, not madness. Determined to rectify past misunderstandings, Seal visited Aiden and revealed the truth. Aiden was an esper. Aiden, confused, admitted to hearing others' thoughts, which had led to his isolation. Seal explained that this was a common trait among psychic espers, and assured him that he no longer needed to live in seclusion. He emphasized the importance of enduring the pain associated with their powers until a personal guide could alleviate it, cautioning against relying on others, including the Saintess. Aiden, puzzled, questioned why even the Saintess was off-limits. Seal reflected on the Saintess. The one person the Empire, which had no guides, believed was sent by the goddess. He understood why Aiden respected her so much. After all, he once did too. Before traveling back in time, in the Stern Empire, Seal had trusted everything the Saintess said. When she claimed that Korea had many guides, the Crown Prince asked if she could bring some to the Empire. She confidently said yes, and Seal, believing her words, followed her through the dimensional gate to Korea. But once he arrived, the truth hit him. She had no real concern for the Empire. Only she could open the dimensional gates, and she brought him there to use him. By the time he realized this, it was too late. The Korean government and the Esper Guide Alliance had already claimed him. As a rare S-class Esper who could control both fire and wind, they were desperate to keep him. They even tried to make him bond with the Saintess, but their match rate was disastrously low. The Saintess couldn't believe it and refused to accept how incompatible they were. His match rate with other guides wasn't any better. People began to think he couldn't be matched with any Earth guides at all, until Swan accidentally walked into a matching room one day. At first he hated her. Back in the present, Aiden called out to Seal, who apologized for zoning out. He realized it wasn't the time to share the dark truth about the Saintess. It could make Aiden distrust him. Instead, Seal changed the topic and asked Aiden to help him with something. He wanted Aiden to go with him to the Clo domain to read Lady Irene's mind. Meanwhile, Irene's life had been calm ever since awakening as a guide. Guides, unlike espers, don't display any outward signs of their abilities, so without an esper partner, Irene seemed like any normal person. But something had changed. The burn scar she had before waking in this body now looked like blooming flower buds. Could this be tied to her awakening? Her mother asked if she was going to the training grounds again today. Irene replied, yes, she had plans for today. Irene planned to practice archery today. Her mother told her to be careful and have fun. Irene kept her awakening as a guide, a secret from her family. Her mother felt guilty for Irene's sudden fever and blamed herself. It was hard to see her daughter suffer, but this event made her less overprotective. Now, Irene was free to train openly at the training ground, something she had only dreamed of before, when she could only practice quietly in her room. In her past life, she trained just to survive, but now she trained to protect her family, the people she loved. She thanked her mom for understanding. Later at the training ground, Irene felt like the wind was against her, but since it was just practice, she didn't mind. Then, her arrow hit the bullseye on the first try. Her brother and father were amazed. They couldn't believe she had hit the target on her very first attempt. It was incredible. Irene thought maybe the wind had helped, but hearing such praise from her family made her heart happy. Meanwhile, Seal watched them. The day after asking Aiden for help, they quickly left for the Clos domain. Since this was an unofficial trip, they hid their identities. One thing they hadn't thought about was that the Clos domain had no portals, so they had to take a portal to the closest region and then travel by carriage, arriving early afternoon. Once there, Aiden fell asleep, exhausted from the journey. Seal slipped out for a quick look around the Clos house. Suddenly he saw Irene and accidentally used his power to help her. He thought, "Oh no, I just used my power like when I helped Swan before." Watching her use the bow, she reminded him so much of Swan, it was almost uncanny. Even the small ways she handled the bow were the same. It couldn't be a coincidence. Then Irene's father noticed him. Seal thought, "Oh no, I've been spotted." Later, Seal met separately with Irene's father. Seal explained that this visit wasn't planned. He was just showing his brother around the Empire's outskirts. Irene's father asked if that was Lord Aiden. Seal confirmed it was. The father asked why they chose this area out of all the regions. Seal said they were visiting many places, and since this domain didn't have a portal, they decided to check it out. The father seemed to accept the explanation, but Seal thought it was strange. If it made sense, then why did he still feel uneasy? The Baron seemed a bit guarded and asked why Seal was watching his daughter so closely. Seal thought to himself, "That's the problem right there." Honestly, telling him straight up that he was investigating because Irene seemed suspicious probably wasn't the best idea. So instead, Seal said it was rare to see a young lady using a bow, so his eyes just naturally followed her. He hoped the Baron would buy that excuse. The Baron nodded, saying he suspected as much. He wasn't bragging, but since she was his daughter, he had to say she truly had exceptional skills. Seal agreed, saying she really did, and that was why he couldn't take his eyes off her. The Baron said he felt proud hearing that from Seal. It was amazing that Irene had been using a bow for only a week, but already hit the bullseye every time. Seal thought he had found a way to connect with the Baron. Then the Baron asked if they were staying at an inn. Seal replied they had just arrived in the Clos domain and had secured a room. The Baron explained that their domain lacked luxury and wasn't really fit for nobility. He suggested they stay at the Baron's manor instead, which was far better than any inn. He also mentioned how grateful he was for Seal's help when Irene collapsed at the Imperial Palace. It helped her recover quickly. Seal said he would gladly accept the offer. Then a maid hurried in, saying Lady Irene needed to change quickly because Duke Leopard had arrived at their manor. Both Seal and the Baron were surprised. The maid added that Lord Aiden would be arriving soon too, so everyone needed to be ready. Irene thought to herself, "Seal is at my house? There's no mention of Seal visiting their domain in the original story. More importantly, an esper is visiting her home just as she's awakened as a guide. She has to be careful so he doesn't find out about her guide status." Guides tend to unintentionally release their guiding power when they see an esper because of an instinctive attraction. In her past life, Irene had great control over her guiding, but now that she was freshly awakened, she might accidentally reveal it when near an esper. She needed to stay alert. Suddenly she saw Seal and froze. Seal saw her too. Her mother quickly said, "Go upstairs with Maid Mary to change, then come down to the dining room. His Grace, Lord Leopard, will arrive soon, and she will be the one to greet him in the dining room." "This way, please." Irene thought, "Stay focused." Later at dinner, Seal and the Baron continued their conversation about monsters and guards. Irene arrived and apologized for the delay. Irene hadn't greeted properly earlier, so she introduced herself again. Aiden said it was a pleasure to meet her. Irene wondered if handshaking was usually something men did. Then she realized that here, It was actually customary for men to kiss the back of a woman's hand as a polite gesture. Since she had only met noblemen like her father and brother before, she had forgotten this. Seal spoke up, telling Aiden to go ahead and do it. Irene blushed. Seal then invited everyone to take a seat. During dinner, Irene's father, brother, and Seal talked about monsters. The meal was neither too long nor too short, and ended quietly. After some time, Irene thought about whether she had been eating or just lost in thought. She knew this Seal wasn't the same as the one she remembered from the past, but still she felt nervous around him, like she was seeing the old Seal again. Why was that? Maybe because it felt like he was staring at her the entire time. Why did he have to show up suddenly and make her feel so confused? If only her family had been a bit wealthier, they wouldn't have gotten involved with Seal. Despite being a noble family with a long history in the empire, their wealth from business was limited. The Clos domain was often attacked by monsters, making it unsafe for business growth. They explained that more than 80% of their income went toward training guards, yet they still lost contracts because the temple barrier was weak in their region, making it risky to do business. If only there was a quick way to make money, like winning the lottery back in Korea. Then she remembered. She had transmigrated into the satis from her homeland, Korea. Those dishes and ingredients had become very popular in the empire. Since the satis hadn't been in the empire long, Korean food hadn't been introduced yet. If they could secure the rights to distribute those ingredients first, they could make a fortune. She planned to talk to her dad about it tomorrow. Meanwhile, Seal thought that if Irene had awakened as a guide, she would have unintentionally released guiding aura when she saw him, an esper. That was a common mistake for newly awakened guides. But since he hadn't sensed any guiding from her, it was more likely that she was an esper. Then he thought, oh no, honestly, he hoped Irene was a guide because she reminded him of Swan. What was he expecting? If Irene really was a guide, would he? The next day at the Clash training ground, the Baron explained why he had gathered everyone during their practice, to introduce some special guests, Duke Leopard and Lord Leopard. The guards whispered excitedly, recognizing the famous Duke Leopard. They said he was not only handsome, but also a powerful espers, which seemed unfair to some. Irene noticed that everyone's reaction to seeing Seal for the first time was always the same. No wonder she fell in love with him at first sight, too. This Seal seemed a little younger than the one she remembered. The Baron then asked Seal if he could say a few words. Seal spoke, saying that although the Clash Guard was small in number and not officially recognized as knights, their skills were well known among other orders. Just by looking into their eyes, he could feel their strong energy. He understood why the Baron was so proud of his troops. One of the guards, without much respect, asked if Seal would spar with them. Even though they lived on the Empire's outskirts, they had heard about both his incredible esper powers and sword skills. The Baron quickly apologized for their boldness, but Seal said it was fine. He was curious to see the Clash Guard's skills, too. Feeling a bit lonely and awkward, Irene invited Lord Leopard to watch together. He agreed. Compared to Seal, Lord Leopard seemed quite cute. Then the guards attacked Seal. He defended easily with one hand and quickly took down one guard, leaving everyone shocked. Irene's brother said it would be an honor to spar with him next. Seal replied to come whenever he was ready. Suddenly, a horn sounded. Seal asked what was happening. David said it was a May signal that monsters had appeared nearby. The Baron said he would have a guard accompany Irene to return to the manor with Lord Leopard. Suddenly, both Irene and Seal were lifted into the air. Seal said he would ride the wind to get them back faster. Irene thought, "Wait, hold on!" But before she could react, they were gone. Seal promised to help fight the monsters, soaring through the air toward the battle. The next scene showed a horde of orcs approaching. The guards were told to hold their position and stop the enemy before they could reach the village. The battle raged on until reinforcements arrived. Seal shouted, "Everyone, fall back!" Then he unleashed his firepower, causing the orcs to scream in pain as they were burned. After some time, it was over. The Baron arrived and confirmed that Seal had killed all the orcs before they could reach the manor. Seal thought to himself how impressive the Duke's abilities truly were. The Baron then asked if Seal could come down now. Without a word, Seal turned and vanished. Moments later, he was on the ground in the jungle, feeling the side effects hitting him harder than before. He knew he needed guiding. Meanwhile, Irene and Aiden arrived safely at the manor. Irene finally relaxed but suddenly realized she had let her guard down, and her guiding energy might have been noticed. She asked Aiden if he was okay, and he said yes. A maid then informed them that the Baroness was very worried about Irene. Irene told her perfect timing, as Aiden was going to visit the mountain behind their manor. The maid offered to show Lord Aiden to his room. Aiden grabbed Irene's hand and asked why she was heading to the mountain. Irene explained she needed to check on the battle with the monsters. Aiden asked if it was dangerous, but she said she would be watching from a safe distance. Then he let go of her hand, apologizing. Irene wondered why he was suddenly acting this way, as if he didn't want to leave her side. She said she would be on her way. Next, Irene noticed green smoke rising. The smoke from burning orc corpses. The monsters that appeared were orcs, but since the corpses were burning, the battle was already over. Seal must have helped. She felt grateful that the monsters showed up when Seal was nearby. Just as she decided to head back, she was shocked to see Seal collapsed on the ground. She called out, "His Grace?" But there was no response. Irene thought he must be unconscious. Suddenly, his power flared uncontrollably. She realized he was having a seizure caused by the side effects of using his power. Seal urgently needed guiding. If things continued like this, the whole mountain could catch fire. Irene tried her best to calm him with aura guiding, but the seizure was too intense. She knew she had to switch to contact guiding. Then, she reached out and grabbed his. Seal took her hand and started the guiding process. After a while, the seizure stopped. Seal grabbed her hand and pulled her into a hug. Irene thought he was coming back to consciousness, but then, to her surprise, Seal started kissing her. She pushed him away and asked, "What are you doing?" The next moment, she was on the ground saying, "His Grace, what is the meaning of this? Get off me right now." Seal kept murmuring that he missed CO and would feel better soon. Irene remembered that in the past, Seal had a habit of murmuring strange things during guiding when he had seizures. She hadn't known that before, but now she was more worried about her broken lip. Her family was definitely going to ask what happened. The scene shifted to the Baron asking Seal what he was doing out there. Seal asked if he had been unconscious, and then thought about how refreshed and healed he felt, as if he'd received guiding. The Baron said it looked like Seal had been in a deep sleep, and guessed that using such a powerful ability must be exhausting. Seal asked if the Baron was the first to find him. The Baron confirmed that he was, explaining that servants often visit that area but none would leave someone sleeping there. Seal thought that made sense, but he was sure someone had given him guiding while he was out cold. Could it have been the Saintess? No, she hadn't started exploring on her own yet. The fresh and clear feeling he had was definitely Swan's guiding. Who else had the same guiding as his wife? Then Seal told Aiden, "There he is." He was actually looking for him. Aiden mentioned that he thought Lady Irene might be an esper and explained that he had been trying to read her mind since they arrived, but he couldn't. It was just like when he first arrived. When they got to the Clash Manor, it seemed like she used some kind of ability. Seal guessed it was an esper ability and asked what kind. Aiden said he wasn't exactly sure, but the moment she used it, he felt very strange, like his mind was soothed and at peace. Seal thought, an ability that calms the mind? That's not an esper ability. That's a guide's ability. Lady Irene really must be a guide. Aiden added that it felt even better when they held hands, and he hadn't felt that kind of peace before. During their conversation, Seal asked Aiden why he had held Lady Irene's hand. Aiden hesitated, then explained that Lady Irene mentioned she was going to the back mountain alone, and suddenly he felt like he didn't want to be apart from her, so he just grabbed her hand without thinking. Seal was surprised and asked if she really went to the mountain. Aiden confirmed he saw her go. Seal then wondered if the person who had given him guiding could have been Lady Irene. It sounded crazy, but what if God had played a trick on him and brought Swan back as Lady Irene? That would explain all the mysteries about her, fitting the puzzle pieces together perfectly. Seal thanked Aiden and said they'd meet again later at dinner in the dining hall. Later, Seal thought the one thing he was sure of was that the guiding he received today was definitely Swan's. He planned to investigate more when everyone was asleep. Meanwhile, Irene thought she couldn't even enjoy dinner with her family because of Seal. But if Seal hadn't been receiving guiding from the Saintess, he would have been in really bad shape when she found him at the mountain, like he hadn't had guiding for a long time. According to the original story, the Saintess gives guiding to Seal and the Crown Prince right after they cross dimensions. But things were clearly unfolding differently now. If Seal hadn't come here, none of this would have happened. He hadn't changed at all. He always made things difficult for her. Honestly, back then she was blinded by love, and even those frustrating traits seemed charming. But not anymore. Her ex-husband, Seal, was arrogant and fussy. What confused her most was that he always needed her to be at home when he returned. If she wasn't, for some reason, he would keep calling until he reached her, find out where she was, and drag her back home. The funny part was, after all that, he wouldn't even acknowledge her presence, and just went about his own business. Seal never told her about meeting Sohn or other espers, so why did he feel the need to know about everyone she met? Despite all these thoughts, she couldn't bring herself to leave him. Honestly, what was it about him that... That night, Seal quietly climbed into Irene's room through the window. Irene was startled. Ever since she had transmigrated, the only person who had secretly entered her room was her worried mother. But her mother always came through the door, not the window. At first, when she was still struggling to trust her family, she had hidden a small weapon under her pillow, taken from her brother's room. She never thought she would actually need to use it, keeping it more as a lucky charm. Suddenly, she swung the weapon but realized she couldn't see Seal's face because it was dark. Seal grabbed her hand and said, "Swan," showing he knew who she was. Irene wondered what he was doing in her room and why he called her by that name. Seal asked why she hadn't told him, saying the evidence was obvious. Suddenly, she accidentally used her guiding power, and Seal felt a calming ease in his body. Seal said he had looked everywhere for her, calling her honey. Irene was shocked. Did he really recognize her? And how did this Seal know who Swan was? She told him she didn't understand what he meant, and thought this man was the Seal she used to know. Seal apologized for coming in the middle of the night, but said the guiding she gave made him miss her so much. He promised she wasn't going anywhere. She had to stay by his side. Irene thought this wasn't the Seal she knew and wondered why he was looking at her that way. She thought he loved Sohn and wasn't sure how to respond. Should she admit she was Swan and suggest they go their separate ways, or deny everything? She didn't know what to do. So, like she said, she denied knowing what he was talking about and insisted she was not the person he thought she was. She began to feel annoyed. One of her dreams had finally come true, so why did he have to show up and ruin it? She firmly said her name was Irene, the first and only daughter of the beloved Clash family, and told him to leave immediately or she would call her father. If he ever intruded into her room again, she threatened, she would sue him, even if he was a duke. Seal said he must have been mistaken, apologized to Lady Irene, and then disappeared. Irene thought she wouldn't. Irene couldn't deny that she felt a little pleased when she realized the Seal of this world remembered who she used to be. But that was as far as her feelings went. She had no clue why he suddenly became so obsessed with her, and she definitely didn't want to be controlled by him again. Meanwhile, Seal thought Swan would never reject him like that. He told himself he must be mistaken. It didn't make sense that Swan was even in this world, but the way she swung her weapon and the guiding he received proved that Lady Irene was indeed Swan. So why was she refusing him? A few days later, Irene noticed Seal blatantly staring at her. Ever since that night he came into her room, he had been following her around and lingering close by, which made her uncomfortable. One day, Seal asked if he could join her for a horse ride. Irene said no. She planned to go for a ride but needed to head back soon because the day was dark and gloomy. Seal promised he wouldn't take much of her time and asked if they could talk. Irene thought back. Before, she wouldn't have trusted him at all. But now, strangely, she felt nothing. Maybe it was because she had a family who loved her for who she was, unlike her past life. Their love had shown her she was special, and living by hiding herself and giving everything up for him was no different from being dead. She warned Seal that if he kept behaving this way, she would have no choice but to tell her parents what happened that night, and then said goodbye. Just then, the Baron came by and asked if Seal was going for a walk. Seal replied it had been a while. The Baron nodded, saying yes, and mentioned that Seal had been away from the manor often because he was standing watch at night. Seal was surprised the Baron himself did that, but the Baron explained that all guards shared those duties equally, no matter their rank. It was a good way to keep discipline and share skills. Seal thought it was an excellent idea, and wanted to do the same with his men when he got back. The Baron then asked if Seal had taken the time to show Lord Aiden around their lands yet. Seal realized the Baron was gently asking him to leave. He forgot he had used Aiden as an excuse to stay, and more importantly, he hadn't told the Baron that since he found out Lady Irene was his wife, he wasn't ready to leave just yet. Seal said he couldn't leave this place just yet. He hadn't shown Aiden everything, so he thought he needed to stay a little longer. The Baron asked if there was a problem. Seal explained he noticed something since arriving. The real head of the Clash family was the Baroness, meaning he needed her approval. Seal asked if he could speak to the Baroness directly about this. The Baron replied it was no problem at all, and that they were honored by Seal's wish to stay and explore their land more. However, he believed his wife was a bit worried because she hadn't had the chance to properly serve Seal due to his unexpected visit. The Baron asked for Seal's understanding. Seal thought that honestly, a Baron had no right to complain about how long a guest stayed. But now that he knew Lady Irene was Swan, the Baron was technically his father-in-law. He couldn't risk leaving a bad impression. So Seal said he had no idea the Baroness was worried because he was having such a great time. He promised to have a good chat with her. The Baron thought, wow, His Grace was truly polite and wise, knowing how to respect those of lower rank. Meanwhile, Irene came into the garden through the back door because she didn't want to stay in her room. Suddenly, Aiden shouted, and Irene wondered what was going on and why he seemed so frantic. Oh, there was a bug on him. Irene grabbed the bug and threw it away. She asked if he was okay and why he came all the way to the back garden. Aiden said he was just looking for a quiet place. Irene asked if he was scared of bugs. Aiden said no, he wasn't scared. They were just gross. Didn't she think bugs were gross? Irene said not really. In her opinion, nothing was grosser than monsters. Aiden asked if she had ever seen monsters in real life. Irene realized she had forgotten. She'd seen countless monsters in her past life, but hadn't seen any since she transmigrated. She said she'd only seen them in books, but she knew what they looked like because her brother described them in detail. Aiden said his brother never talked to him about monsters before. Irene asked why not and suggested he try asking him, since she was usually the one pestering her brother. Aiden wondered if he'd actually tell him, if he asked. Irene replied, of course she'd heard that Aiden said that his brother brought him here to help him get more exposure to the world, and he guesses Seal made that decision because he cares about him. Aiden then said he's going to head back to his room. Irene wondered what was wrong. After a while, she thought her mother would like this and that she must be busy working in the living room again. When she opened the door, she was shocked to see her mother and Seal together. Irene wondered why Seal was with her mother before she arrived. Seal commented on the nice aroma and Irene's mother said thanks, explaining she made the tea herself by drying various herbs, happy that he liked it. Seal said he had never heard of a noble family making their own tea before. The Baroness explained that he must know by now their family couldn't afford high-quality black tea, so they had to find alternatives. Then she asked Seal what he wanted to talk about. Seal said he came to ask for her help because he still had things to take care of in the Clash domain and hoped she would allow him and his brother to stay longer. The Baroness looked angry. Seal asked why she seemed upset. He explained that usually he didn't have to stay at another family's manor because they had a townhouse for their family. But when visiting places without one, he would pay a fee to stay at a noble's manor for a few days. That was what the payment was for. The Baroness replied that they were grateful but couldn't host him any longer due to financial problems, and that wasn't what they wanted. Seal said he just wanted to take the burden off her shoulders. He thought this was a big misunderstanding and needed to clear it up. Just then, Irene arrived and wondered where her dad was and why Seal was talking to her mom alone. Irene thought the Baron was actually taking a bath. She noticed her mom looked pretty upset. The Baroness said Seal could stay as long as he wanted, but asked him to take this away. Irene guessed her mom was telling Seal to leave, but Seal had paid money to extend his stay. Seal said he meant no offense by giving the money. The Baroness said she understood it was a gesture of thanks, but it felt like putting a price on their effort. She admitted they lived more like... The Baroness explained that their family might seem more like commoners than nobles, but they still have their pride and self-respect. Seal noticed this, and Irene wondered why he was looking at her like he needed help. She had never seen her kind and gentle mother show such anger toward anyone before, so she had no intention of helping someone who upset her. Seal then reminded her that he had burned part of the nearby mountain during the Master's wave recently. But even before that, he accidentally burned a part of the couch in the room where he was staying. Irene thought about how her mom had brought that couch from her hometown when she got married, and she wondered why Seal would bring up something that would only make his situation worse. That only confirmed to Irene that he planned to leave their house today. Seal continued, saying he only wanted to pay for the damage he caused. So, the gold coins he gave weren't for their kindness or effort, but to cover the cost of burning the mountain and the couch. He apologized sincerely, but warned that sometimes these mistakes happen because he can't fully control his power. Similar accidents might happen again during his stay, so he hoped for their understanding. Irene thought it would be hard for him if other nobles found out he made such mistakes as an esper. She didn't believe him. No one would question his abilities since he was a duke, and the only esper besides his younger brother. The Baroness asked if espers could make mistakes, saying she found it hard to believe. Seal explained that most people think they don't, but it makes sense when you realize espers are human too. They have emotions and can make mistakes just like anyone else. Irene thought it was hard to believe that someone so revered as receiving God's blessing could slip up. She remembered that espers had side effects in her past life, but her mother didn't know about them, so maybe people in this world didn't either. Seal then said this was confidential information known only to espers themselves or the imperial family, but he didn't mind sharing it with the Baroness and Lady Irene because of their kindness. He explained that espers need guiding. Otherwise, they are like defects. From the moment an esper awakens their power, it's like walking barefoot on hot sand without water. For an esper without a guide, there are only two ways to stop the pain: either take their own life or find an exclusive. Seal spoke about having an exclusive guide just for him. Irene wondered if he was sure she was Swan and worried what would happen if he told her mom about it. The Baroness glanced at the time and apologized sincerely, saying she had to leave to prepare lunch so no one would go hungry. Seal stood up and opened the door. The Baroness commented that none of the men in her family were ever this thoughtful. Irene said she would leave too, but Seal asked if he could have a word before lunch, saying he had just one question. Irene agreed, and they went to the garden. Seal started by apologizing for his behavior that night. Irene said she didn't forgive him but would let it go if he promised not to enter her room without permission again. Seal promised and seemed genuinely sorry. Then he asked about a bad fever she had during the coming-of-age ceremony at the imperial palace, explaining it was likely an awakening fever. He wanted to know how a newly awakened guide could control her aura so well. Seal explained that a guide automatically starts guiding with just a simple touch from an esper and even releases guiding energy subconsciously when near an esper. Yet Irene never slipped even a drop, even when they were alone in a room with an S-class esper. It was as if she had guided before. He wanted her explanation. Irene realized that Seal knew who she was and wanted her to admit it. She was confused why he was acting so desperate for her. It wasn't like the Seal she knew. She had no idea why he was behaving this way but was determined not to give in. So, she said she didn't understand and was leaving. Seal thought it was good to know all these things about his wife, but there was a downside. He could tell exactly how mad she was. Despite openly showing he knew her identity, she still wouldn't admit it. She had always looked at him like he was the only person that mattered. Seal felt shocked by how uninterested Irene was, especially since he was willing to do anything for her. All he wanted was for her to just admit that she was his wife. Meanwhile, the butler mentioned that Duke Leopard had gone on a tour with Lord Aiden and was currently in the Clash domain. The prince wondered why Leopard would go so far, but the butler didn't know the reason. The prince remembered the last time he saw Leopard was at the coming-of-age ceremony over a month ago. Seal, his friend and a respected man, usually stayed in his manor in the capital and often visited the palace casually. So, it was strange that he left during such an important time when the saintess had appeared. No one was happier than the prince when the temple prophesied the saint's arrival. So why would Leopard leave now? Just then, the saintess arrived. The prince politely escorted her, feeling excited. Although she was only a C-class guide in Korea, the prince treated her like an S-class guide, and she wouldn't mind living here. The saintess apologized for the sudden visit, but said she had an urgent concern to discuss. The prince asked who was troubling her. The saintess said it was him, the prince himself. He was surprised to hear that he was the cause of her worry. She explained she was concerned he hadn't reached out since the last guiding she gave 2 weeks ago and asked if he wanted her to guide him again, then reached out her hand. The prince felt a strange sensation. His needs were being met, but he still longed for more. The saintess, whose real name was Sean, explained that just using the hand for guiding wasn't enough for full satisfaction, which was normal. When the prince asked what proper guiding was, Sean admitted she didn't know exactly yet, but instinctively started kissing him. The prince felt comforted. Sean then asked where the other esper was, since she had heard there were only 2 espers in the empire, and that man had been standing with her. Sean wondered why the other esper, who was supposed to come for guiding at the banquet, hadn't shown up yet. The prince explained that he was currently away on an inspection mission. Sean thought about how much fun it would be to spend time with both handsome men at once, but guessed the other esper just didn't know how good guiding could feel yet. She said she was waiting for a proper introduction, but since she probably wouldn't see him this time, the prince promised he'd send word to bring him back immediately. Sean thanked him and kissed the prince again. Later, she mentioned she'd likely meet the other esper during her visit tomorrow. The prince agreed and joked that he'd make the other esper pay for keeping her waiting. Sean thought that didn't sound like a very harsh punishment since she seemed to have a good relationship with him. Curious, she asked the prince the other esper's name. He told her it was Seal and shared some of his family background. Seal was the only duke in the empire. Hearing his name made the prince feel strangely frustrated because all he really wanted was to hear Sean's voice calling for him. After a while in the carriage, Sean thought about having to return to the dull temple again and wished she could stay at the imperial palace. She had already been there for over a month. Before arriving, she had been on a quest as an assistant guide in Korea. That day, countless monsters appeared, and all the espers ran away, leaving her alone to face danger. Just when she hit a dead end, her phone, somehow still getting a signal, started ringing. When she answered, a bright light surrounded her, and she lost consciousness. She woke up surrounded by people in strange clothes, praying and greeting her with tears in their eyes. That's how her life in this new world began. She came through that phone and needed it to return. She hadn't seen the app before, but it looked like a game interface. It showed her guide level, class, and quest. Become the first guide of this world, and gather others to help improve your abilities. Wait, there were other guides here too? She felt like she had to complete this quest to return to Korea, but she wasn't sure why. Sean had always been treated like royalty as the only guide, so why would she need to find another guide and lower her value? Since she was already here, she decided to make the most of it. Meanwhile, Baron expressed his regret that they had to say goodbye so suddenly, but invited them to visit again in the future. Seal thought the only reason he had to leave the K-Clash domain so abruptly was that His Highness had urgently requested his return. He didn't know why, but he was disappointed he had to leave his wife so helplessly. He wondered if there was a way he could bring Lady Irene to the capital, where she might end up meeting the prince or the saintess. Seal replied that if they came to House Leopard and shared their training methods, he would make sure it happened. Irene thought Seal would never leave, but now His Highness had made him. Seal also considered that it wouldn't be a good idea for his wife to meet the saintess, who had tormented her in her past life. Staying in the K-Clash domain seemed safer for her than going to the capital. This time, Seal was determined not to lose her. The next scene, Aiden announced he was heading to the Annex Manor. Seal instructed the staff to prepare Aiden's room in the main manor and move all of his belongings. He asked Aiden if he remembered what he'd said on the way back, how he couldn't hear other people's thoughts as much anymore, meaning he didn't need to hide in the Annex Manor. Aiden replied, "Thanks, brother." The next day, the prince remarked, "So he's here." Sean commented that he must be the other esper. It had been a while since the banquet. Seal responded, "Yes, it has been a while, Your Holiness." Afterward, Sean said she had been dying to meet him, curious about what he would be like since they had only met briefly during the coming-of-age ceremony. Seal replied, "Is that so?" Sean observed he must be a bit shy, unlike the prince. The prince agreed, though in his mind he thought Seal would be blessed by the saintess today, a great thing considering the pain he had endured as an esper. Still, the prince felt an odd discomfort. Sean suggested that Seal must have been in a lot of pain, since all espers needed a guide. She offered to help him, holding out her hand. Seal thought he had no choice but to accept her guiding, while Sean, though acting indifferent, knew that all espers longed for it. She wondered how long he could keep up that cold expression. Something was changing suddenly, and Sean felt a strange sensation. Her guiding seemed to be leaking away. Seal noticed that his body wasn't absorbing the guiding at all, and wondered why. Was it because he had already received enough from his wife? Meanwhile, Sean felt a sharp pain, realizing she had pushed herself too hard. How come her guiding wasn't working? Was he a higher-class esper than the Crown Prince? But then she lost consciousness. Seal thought to himself that a couple of rounds of guiding shouldn't block the influence of another guide. The sensation felt strangely familiar, almost like when he was bound to someone before. Could it be that he was still bound to his wife? A bond was a contract between an esper and a guide, built on mutual understanding and affection, making them belong to each other. It was especially important for espers to be careful with such bonds, as they couldn't receive guiding from anyone else once bound. Even at the brink of death, they couldn't seek guidance from anyone but their bound guide. Seal remembered that he had been bound to Swan in Korea because they were married, but since he was now in a time before he went to Korea, technically, he shouldn't have been bound to her yet. However, if the Swan who remembered him was here, it didn't matter where in the past this was anymore. This confirmed his suspicion. Swan was Lady Irene. He was eager to see his wife right away, but before he did, he knew he had to speak with the high priest. The high priest was the only man who had heard God's voice and had foretold the arrival of the saintess. He might be able to provide some clarity on the situation. After some time, the prince asked, "Where is the duke?" The butler replied, "Apparently he left the palace." The prince thought to himself that the duke had changed ever since the coming-of-age ceremony, but he still couldn't understand his attitude toward the saintess. The prince then ordered, "Make sure no one talks about this. It might impact Seal negatively if rumors start circulating." The prince asked, "What did the priest say?" The butler responded, "They still want Her Holiness to return to them." The prince decided he would write a letter himself and had the butler ensure it was delivered. A while later, the prince said, "Send this letter to the high priest and this one to House Leopard. Be discreet with this one." The prince felt something strange. His thoughts were clouded. Something wasn't right, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Baron's saying he will be away for about 2 weeks and tells David to manage the guards and take good care of his sister and mother. David reassures him it's not the first time he's gone. The Baroness comments that it seems longer than usual. The Baron explains that he's going to get a special ingredient that Irene wants. Irene says she wants to try a rare ingredient from the kingdom of Uria and asked her father to open a trade route for it, but he wanted her to wait until it was proper because the Duke was around. She hopes the trade route will be set up before other families get the chance. Then, the mother suggests going for a walk and asks Irene if she has fallen for the Duke. Irene denies it. The mother shares that when she lived in the capital before meeting Irene's father, she was impressed by a nobleman she met and thought all nobles were that elegant and polite. That's when she felt love for the first time. Irene realizes her father wasn't her mother's first love. The mother explains that after her grandmother passed away, she returned to her hometown and met Irene's father. She tells Irene that she doesn't care who she marries as long as she loves them. Irene thinks to herself, asking if she can do her best to stay close. She feels like she still hasn't gotten over the past fire. She says she wants what makes the Duke happy and wants to live by his side forever. Her mother says she knew Irene would feel this way. Irene replies that her mother is wrong and asks why she thinks she fell for the Duke. Her mother says love isn't a bad thing and nothing to be ashamed of. Irene insists she doesn't love him. Her mother then asks why Irene can't take her eyes off him and why she keeps glancing at the door as if waiting for him. Irene tries to convince herself she's just avoiding him, not waiting, but she can't deny how attentive she is. The Baroness thinks the Duke's feelings for Irene and her interest in him were clear from the moment he came to the manor. It wasn't exactly love at first sight, but more like meeting someone she was meant to be with. The Baroness admits she likes the Duke, but worries about the powerful family's advisors and relatives who won't be happy with Irene. A noble lady with a scar might be treated like an outcast, and she won't let her daughter face such humiliation. She remembers when Irene woke up from being presumed dead, with no light in her eyes and acting like a different person. She was scared seeing her like that, afraid of losing her again. But she reminds herself that Irene is still her daughter despite the change. Meanwhile, the Grand Priest says to the Duke, "You have finally come, the one who returned." The Duke asks why he wasn't summoned if the priest knew he came back in time. The priest replies that summoning him might stop the blessings of oracles because humans must find their own answers. The Duke asks if the priest means he should give in to fate. The priest says no, he means the Duke should face his fate. The Duke then asks what his fate is, and the priest begins to answer. The Grand Priest said he only received a prophecy about the saint's arrival. But soon after he got a strange new message. The Duke asked what it was. The priest said he didn't fully understand it, but hoped the Duke could figure it out. The Duke remembered that the Grand Priest from the past really admired Soan, which made sense since he was closest to God and respected what God sent. The priest continued, saying God spoke to him with an angry voice, promising one more chance. God said the Duke must find the one who returned in time and the real saint to protect the world. Those were the exact words. The priest was confused by the meaning of the real saint and the one who returned in time, and thought deeply about it. The Duke asked why the priest thought it meant him since God didn't specify. The priest explained he found a book that gave him the answer. The Duke realized it was the same novel he had seen in Korea before returning. He was interested because Suan had read it many times, and he felt drawn to open it. The book revealed that the world he lived in was just the setting of a novel. The priest said he found the book on his desk after receiving the strange prophecy, and was puzzled because it described the empire's future like a prophecy book. The Duke understood why the priest hadn't summoned him. In the novel, a character named Seal was obsessed with the saint. When the saint chose the crown prince over him, Seal started a rebellion. Seal's forces were stronger at first, but greed consumed him, and his power went out of control, leading to his death. The Duke said it wasn't a prophecy, but just a novel. The priest said it was based on their past. The Duke replied that the past was gone, and he had no intention of betraying His Highness now or ever. The priest said he never believed the Duke would betray anyone, but was relieved to hear him say it. The priest added that his theory would have stayed a guess if the Duke hadn't come to see him. He thought the one who could return in time had to pay a price, making the one who died the most likely candidate. The priest told the Duke that he was the only one who could follow God's will and find the real saint. He promised to support him with whatever he needed. The Duke asked why nothing had been done about the saintess yet. The priest said everyone deserves a fair chance. Later that night, the Duke thought about a letter from His Highness, requesting him to return to the palace the next day to apologize to the saintess. The Duke worried how he could tell His Highness that the saintess was fake, and whether anyone would believe him. Even the most devoted followers would struggle to accept such a truth. Who would believe a timeline that had already passed? Then he heard Swanseal's voice, reassuring him that she was always on his side. The Duke wondered if talking to her would ease his heart. The next day, the butler gave the Duke all the letters and invitations he received while away, and a list of visitors. The Duke asked why his uncle came. The butler said his uncle insisted the Duke needed a spouse quickly, and had a lady to introduce. He said all he wanted was just a date. The Duke thought nothing had changed, probably the daughter of one of his uncle's servants as before. He called himself an idiot for not realizing sooner. The Stern Empire was strictly hierarchical, unlike Korea, so using this system might help him get his wife back, even if she hated him. He didn't care as long as he could be with her. Then the Duke said there was something he needed to do first thing tomorrow: send a marriage proposal to the house of Baron Clash and prepare a suitable gift. The butler agreed. The Duke thought about searching his mother's storage for jewelry since she loved it. He was sure there were nice things there. He planned to visit the capital to find the most popular boutique among noble ladies and bring the stylist to him since he knew her size. For the gift, he wanted something special from their fief, and planned to give a present to every citizen of the Clash domain so everyone would know he was in love with her and no one would dare take her away. 10 days later, Irene asked her mother if those were all the gifts. The butler responded, apologizing for the delay. Without warning, the Duke had sent Irene gifts along with a letter. Irene wondered if Seal had actually written it, and asked the butler if the Duke had sent her a letter. The butler confirmed it was a marriage proposal. Irene was shocked. How could the Duke send such a proposal out of the blue? The butler explained that all the gifts were carefully chosen by the Duke himself, and that he planned to visit soon to discuss details. He asked for understanding since the Duke was currently at the Imperial Palace and couldn't come yet. Irene thought seriously about the proposal, worried about what her father, a baron, would say. The sheer number of gifts made it clear the Duke wouldn't accept a refusal easily. She firmly told the butler she refused and wanted the gifts taken back. The butler apologized but urged her to reconsider, saying he had orders to follow. Irene told him to bring her the Duke's response and to keep the gifts separate because she couldn't allow them in the manor. The butler agreed, but asked her to keep the gifts for now since they were valuable and couldn't be stored in the carriage. Irene realized it wasn't easy to reject the Duke again, especially since he was cooperating so much. The Baron suggested rehiring carriages to return the gifts, but Irene insisted on at least accepting the letter. The Baroness told Irene to wrap things up and go back to her room. Irene thought about that damned husband. He never once sent her a text in their past life, but now he wrote her a letter for the first time. She imagined others would laugh if they knew how excited she was to get a letter from a man who never reached out before. She couldn't understand her feelings. The marriage proposal letter barely mentioned asking her to marry him. Instead, it was filled with small, caring questions, asking if she was eating well, still drinking cold water, or if anyone had visited her. Irene wondered why he was doing this after everything, after never once looking at her when she desperately wanted his attention. Irene wondered why Seal was suddenly acting like he wanted her. Did he not realize that the Suan he once knew was gone? She felt like he was pretending to want her because he got a taste of her guidance. Since there were hardly any guides in the Empire, maybe he wanted her to sacrifice herself by becoming his personal guide again like before. But Irene had learned too much to live like she used to. She was no longer desperate for love or seeking attention, because she had a family that loved her unconditionally. She was eager for her father to return. Then she heard a voice. Her dad was home. The Baron said, "My sweetheart, I'm home." When Irene came downstairs to greet him, she saw the chief butler talking to her father. Since it was a conversation between the Duke's servant and the head of the family, it wasn't polite to interrupt, so she just watched them walk into the living room. Her mother urged her to come over and introduce herself because Baron Ellen from the neighboring domain had arrived with her father Alan. Morgan, Alan's son, greeted her warmly, noting how much she had grown. After some talk, Morgan said he had taken all their luggage from the carriage and asked where to bring it. Irene thought they must have been close family friends, considering how friendly her mother was. Morgan remarked she had changed a lot, and Alan asked if she remembered him. Irene honestly said she didn't, and her mother explained that Irene had been very sick as a child and didn't remember much from that time. Alan insisted on escorting Irene, saying he couldn't let a lady walk alone. Irene thought this family was even closer to hers than she had realized, especially since her family never invited anyone to their manor after what had happened to her. Morgan asked if he could escort her, and she accepted, thanking him. He showed her to the garden and mentioned the seal on the carriages belonged to the House of Leopard, asking if she knew them. Irene replied that her father had helped them before. Even though he was the successor of a close family friend, she didn't feel the need to share everything. Morgan mentioned that Irene might not know this because it was her father, but Uncle Arthur was a hero among the knights. Surprised, Irene asked if her father was really a hero, and Morgan confirmed it. Then he shared the whole story with her. Noticing Morgan looked a bit tired, Irene offered to get him some cold water, but he said he was fine. She then asked why he was sweating so much and if he felt ill. Morgan excused himself for a moment. Irene thought about how strange it was that such a big and strong man seemed nervous and fidgety. She noticed his footsteps were deeply imprinted in the ground, something only recently awakened physical-type espers could do. She decided she needed to investigate this. Then she asked Morgan if he had recently suffered a high fever, and he was surprised she knew. Just then, Morgan returned, but Alan suddenly shouted at him for running off and leaving Irene alone. Morgan tried to explain, but said something more important had come up. A guest had appeared from the manor and might need to be seen off. Later, the butler said, "I hope we meet again soon." Irene wondered what they had talked about for her father's usually cheerful smile to change so much. Had he been threatened? The Baron shouted, "I won't lose my daughter to that thief." Irene thought about how shameless the Duke was. Alan said it was a bit harsh to call the Duke a thief, but the Baron insisted that not even the Crown Prince could have his daughter. Then Irene asked if the Baron had brought what she wanted to eat, and he replied yes, he hadn't forgotten. Suddenly, Morgan asked if a certain symptom was happening again. Alan said they'd get a doctor, but the Baron said no need. Alan explained that since the high fever, the boy had been having seizures occasionally. They had multiple doctors check him out, but no one could diagnose the problem. He seemed to get better with time, so Alan asked if it was okay to spend the night. Irene thought this confirmed that the boy was an esper, a physical-type esper who had just awakened. The book she had read mentioned only 3 of them, whether esper or guide. Now, here was another esper, just like her. She wondered why. The story in the book seemed to keep changing, and the seizures Morgan had were probably because he wasn't receiving proper guidance. Irene decided she needed to help him. Alan asked if he could trust a reliable servant to keep Morgan's condition a secret, as he didn't want others to find out about his son. Irene promised to take care of him. The Baroness asked if she'd be okay with this, and Irene reassured them that the servants wouldn't spread rumors, but she also thought the Baron would feel better knowing she was watching over Morgan. As Irene got to work, she thought to herself that she and Morgan weren't really compatible, and that taking care of him took more energy than guiding Seal. Still, she was grateful Morgan collapsed at her place. Otherwise, he might have gone berserk without a guide and disappeared from this world. Morgan woke up and asked if Irene was awake too. When he thought about what happened, he felt refreshed, like his body had returned to how it was before the fever. In fact, he felt even better. He realized that since meeting Irene, his headaches disappeared and his breathing improved. He asked her if she had suffered a high fever as well, and she confirmed it happened about a month ago. Morgan then asked if she had gotten stronger since then. Irene told him she had but warned that she wasn't nearly as strong as him. Morgan said he was trying to be careful since he had accidentally hurt people before, but sometimes his hands moved without his control. He promised he wouldn't touch her unless necessary. Morgan felt happy, as if the lonely days he spent feeling like an outcast were finally validated. Irene told him to keep what she told him a secret, and Morgan promised he would. Now, Irene wanted to teach Morgan how to control his energy. She suggested he practice regularly. Morgan said he was trying but wasn't sure how. Irene explained that when lifting a teaspoon, you do it very gently, so why not handle all items as if they were that teaspoon? She handed him a cushion. Morgan thought it was amazing and believed he could control his wild strength if he followed Irene's advice. Suddenly he sneezed and apologized, realizing he should have practiced more carefully. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Irene started laughing and said, "Let's practice outside. I'll help you." Meanwhile, at the imperial palace, the crown prince asked the duke, "What are you doing?" and told him to apologize to the saintess immediately. The saintess replied calmly, "It's all right, your highness." The duke thought about his recent visit to the high priest and how he might subtly let the crown prince know that the saintess was a fraud. Then he said respectfully, "Your highness, I don't understand why I must apologize to her. Isn't it strange that her divine power doesn't work on me? The saintess should be able to guide all espers equally. Have we forgotten what we learned as children? What we were told about our long-awaited saintess?" The prince thought to himself that Seal hadn't done anything wrong to the saintess, yet he was still angry with him. The saintess admitted it was a mistake. The duke asked, "Did you just admit it was your fault?" She explained she wasn't feeling well that day, or maybe still unfamiliar with this world. The prince told her not to overwork herself, and she apologized, saying she was only trying to fulfill her duty as the saintess. She thought to herself, "I don't understand an esper who doesn't care about the safety of the Empire's holy guide. What if there's something wrong with me? But no, this can't all be my fault." Then she said she missed her hometown, especially the spicy food they enjoyed there, which was different from the food here. She had forgotten about her discomfort as she adjusted, but she believed her weakness came from longing for home. The prince kindly offered, "The imperial chef can make anything you want. Just tell me, and I'll have it made right away." She thanked him warmly, feeling comforted. The duke said, "Since the saintess admitted her fault, I no longer need to apologize. I am a duke of the empire, and what the saintess did is like framing me. Her failure to admit her mistake is blatant treason because she insulted the imperial family." The saintess promised that when she felt better, she would return to prove she truly was the saintess. The prince interrupted, "That's enough. She's a patient now, so there's no need to be so harsh. The saintess said, I don't want to be like this either, but I hope you handle this matter fairly. The prince replied, You're right, since Her Holiness admitted her mistake. The saintess apologized sincerely, saying, I'm truly sorry for the trouble I've caused. The duke thought to himself that he wanted to press her further, but his priority was not her. It was to return to his wife. After some time, the duke asked Aiden if he had packed everything. Aiden replied yes and asked, Are we really going to see Lady Irene again? The duke said yes, thinking eagerly about holding her and sharing their warmth. Then the duke asked the chief butler why he was there. The butler apologized, and the duke guessed that Irene must have turned down the proposal. The duke said, It's okay. I didn't expect her to accept right away. The butler apologized again. Aiden thought that Lady Irene must have rejected Seal's proposal and wondered why, and strangely the rejection didn't upset him. The duke thought he was fine when he was with Irene, but realized he had to go. In the next scene, the duke wondered where Irene was, and when he saw her smiling brightly with someone else, he got curious. Suddenly, Irene asked Morgan what was wrong. Morgan said, There's an intruder in the sky. The duke wondered how Morgan noticed him, but then saw Morgan throw a branch with perfect aim. The duke thought only a swordmaster or a physical-type esper could do that, but if it were a swordmaster, he'd recognize him, so the man with Irene must be an esper. Irene thought, That's Seal. What is he doing here again? Suddenly she was lifted into the air. Morgan shouted, Are you all right? Irene replied, I'm fine. Suddenly the duke grabbed her, mouthing something over and over. Irene asked, What is the meaning of this, your grace? Let me go. The duke turned and left. Irene thought she didn't know how he recognized her, but he shouldn't behave like this if he truly knew she was Swan, unless he had a conscience. The duke tried to talk to her, but she didn't respond, so he began kissing her passionately. Then Irene started kissing him back. She thought, My head rejects him, but my body reacts instinctively. I'm no longer Swan, but it feels like I'm going back to my past life when I open my eyes. Irene's mind drifted back to the days when Seal was all that mattered to her. The duke said softly, Swan, I missed you so much. But Irene was determined not to be swayed, not after everything it had taken for him to show any affection. I won't go back to being that weak person, she thought. The duke apologized. I'm sorry. Irene asked, Why are you doing this to me? She remembered how he never showed her even a little love, no matter how hard she tried. What more do you want from me? She demanded. The duke replied, Honey. Irene was shocked. How could he smile when she was serious? She said firmly, Let go. The duke refused. No, not even if you look at me with those beautiful eyes. In frustration, Irene hit his leg, and the duke laughed. She wondered what was wrong with him. I missed you, honey, he said again. Irene took a deep breath and said, I want to make this clear. The duke replied, Sure, tell me anything. Irene stated, We're done. Because I died, you're my ex-husband now, so stop calling me honey. It's disgusting. The duke responded, Did you say I'm your ex-husband? Irene confirmed, Yes, I died, so it's like a divorce. Our marriage is completely over. Cancel the proposal and stop bothering my father. That felt good to say. She realized she still had feelings left over because she never got to express them. Then she shouted, Stop calling me by the name of someone who doesn't exist anymore. What's your problem? The duke repeated, Honey. Irene continued firmly, I'm not your wife anymore. The duke said, I won't accept that. I'm going to make you fall for me again. Irene replied, That will never happen. The duke insisted, Things are different now. I'll give you what I couldn't before. Irene told him, I don't want that anymore. I said stop calling me that. Suddenly the duke grabbed her and flew into the air. Morgan showed up and asked, Are you all right? The duke thought, How incredibly stupid. Physical types always are. How dare he interrupt a conversation with my wife? Irene thought, that crazy bastard. Morgan lifted a tree and hurled it at the Duke. The Duke used his power to throw the tree back. Morgan realized it was too late to dodge, so he punched the tree, breaking it apart. Irene shouted, "Stop it! Calm down, both of you! And I'm fine, Morgan!" The Duke then used his magic, as Irene tried to keep peace. Irene thought sadly that physical-type espers just can't compete with elemental types. That meant Morgan had almost no chance of beating Seal. She didn't think Seal wanted to kill Morgan since he wasn't using his fire powers fully, but this was going too far. Then she shouted, "He's a guest at my manor! Stop it!" Suddenly the Duke tried to use his fire powers. Irene wondered how she could stop him and said, "If you don't stop, I'm going to tear up the letter you wrote me." The Duke asked, "The letter? You haven't burned it yet?" Irene replied, "I should have burned it sooner, but I was too busy today." "What a pity," the Duke said. "It's fine, I'll write you another one." Irene told him, "Then I won't read it." "Is this a joke?" the Duke asked. "But if I leave that annoying esper alone, will you keep the letter?" Irene replied, "That's none of your business. What I do with the letter doesn't concern you." The Duke said, "You're right, it's not my business to know." Irene thought how different he was from the Seal she used to know. How could someone change like this? The Duke asked, "Give me another chance, honey." Irene whispered, "I told you not to call me that. What if Morgan hears you?" The Duke hugged her and said, "Don't look at other men. You keep denying it, but I still consider you my wife. I'll do better. I'll do everything I never got to do for you. So can you please give me one more chance?" Irene thought, "I have no intention of going back to the past, not even a little bit." She said, "I want to marry someone like my father in this life. Actually, I want to marry someone my parents approve of. That's the rule I've set for myself. So if you want me, convince my family first." The Duke replied, "Okay." Irene thought her parents weren't impressed with him, so she wondered if he could really do that. Then she spoke. "Morgan, are you okay? Wake up." The Duke thought, "Let it go." She finally told the truth, "So I don't want to do anything that makes her unhappy." Morgan said, "Irene, are you all right?" Suddenly he was hit by a stone. The Duke thought, "But an esper is an exception." Irene asked Morgan if he had lost his mind. The Duke replied, "Have you only just found out? I'm so happy to see you again." Then he thought, "I'll make her fall for me again, so she only looks at me." After a while they arrived back at the Baron's manor. The Duke threw Morgan aside. Alan spoke, "My child." The Baron said, "Your Grace, please explain the situation." The Duke quickly added, "I hope you don't get the wrong idea. What I'm asking for is your understanding right now." The Baron thought to himself, "How can he be so shameless?" Then he asked, "I don't get it. How could you hurt a guest of our family? And why did you take my daughter? Is this because she rejected your marriage proposal?" The Duke replied, "As unfortunate as this all happened because of his mistake." Baron Alan looked surprised and asked, "Did you know your son is an esper?" "Yes," said the Duke. "Espers often react impulsively when they encounter another esper. I believe your son recently awakened his powers because he attacked as soon as he saw me. I had to defend myself." Irene thought to herself, "He's trying to weasel his way out of this." The Baron said, "I see, so that's what happened." Irene felt uneasy because she felt like she was lying to her family. But if she told the truth, she'd have to reveal that she's a transmigrator and a guide. The Duke told the Baron, "From what I can tell, your son is a physical-type esper. Don't worry, treat him like a normal person, because he'll get better soon." Irene's father then asked, "Why did you sneak into our manor without telling anyone? You did the same thing last time." Irene recalled the last time Seal snuck in. The Duke answered, "That was just because I wanted to check on her. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Irene thought, "I feel like I'm missing something here." Then she said, "For now, We should focus on helping Morgan. The Baron nodded. You're right, honey. Why don't you go to your room? The Duke said, I'm sure everything will be fine, but I'll visit again tomorrow. The Baron warned, Please don't touch my daughter without permission, and nothing will change just because you visit. I will never approve of this. Then he said, Let's go inside. After that, Irene's father said, You must have been really shocked. Why would they drag you into their stupid fight? Irene thought, Maybe it's time to reveal that I'm a guide. If I had told them earlier, I wouldn't have hesitated just now. But I still can't share the biggest secret. How do I tell them their daughter is gone and a stranger is living in her body? The Baron told her, You should go to your room. I'll handle things. Irene replied, I need to stay and help Morgan heal sooner. After a while, Irene told them, There's something I need to tell you all. First of all, I'm sorry for what... Baron Allen replied, It's all right. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just a bit surprising. I still can't believe Morgan is an esper. Irene continued, It's true, Morgan is an esper, and that's why I need to be here to help heal him. Then, she began healing him. Afterward, Irene thought, I used way more energy than when I guided Seal while he was unconscious, but I have to tell my family now. She said, To be honest, a strange power awakened inside me after I got through that terrible fever. I can't really explain it, but I feel like I have a responsibility to help espers, and somehow I instinctively learned how to do it. Irene thought, physical-type espers usually heal faster, but it's rare for someone to heal this quickly after just a little guidance. I think he might be an A- class esper. David asked, What's this mark? It kind of looks like Giselle Rose's. Irene thought, the mark that appeared right after I was awakened as a guide was just buds that hadn't bloomed yet. But now, she replied, It showed up after the fever, but I'm not sure what it means. David asked, Are you okay? Why don't we visit the temple? Irene thought, if I go to the temple, they'll find out I'm a guide, which means I'd have to face Sean directly. I don't want that. She said, No, it's fine. I don't want others to know about this. Her mother reassured her, Don't worry. If that's what you want, we won't tell anyone. Baron Allen added, Don't worry about the news getting out. Irene spoke, Well then, may I be excused? I'd like to rest in my room. David gently lifted her and said, I'll take you to your room. Then she asked, Will this affect our family? David smiled and said, What are you worried about? Is it your special ability to help espers or the Duke? Irene thought, I want to say both, but it's hard to answer because I'm not even sure myself. Why was I awakened as a guide? There's already the Saintess, but could that be the reason? David said, I can literally see the worry flying around in your head. Don't stress about it. Just get some rest. You trust father and mother, don't you? Irene replied, More than anyone. David said, Then please rest well, little sister. The next day, in the garden of the imperial palace, the Saintess thought, This tastes bitter. I wish I could have coffee instead of this strange tea. Then she said, I would like to be... The saint thought the crown prince was busy working, so this was the perfect chance to check her phone alone. She was frustrated and thought, Show me how to get back home instead of this useless quest window. My phone battery is at 10%. What if I never get the chance to go back to Korea? I wasted time because of that esper. So what if he's a duke? Even the crown prince is careful around me. But it's strange. Why won't my guiding work on him? What is this? A new app? The Saintess kept thinking, I didn't know there was an app hidden behind the character window. What is it? Oh, I knew it. It's a bit sad to leave because they were so good to me, but living here is uncomfortable since it's missing too many things. The law of equivalent exchange, a random event. I don't really understand it, but it means no harm will come to me. Wow, this is a bit scary now that I have to step inside. There's no time. My battery is less than 5%. I can't waste any more time, so here I go. Next scene. A butler said, Apologies, but my master is not home at the moment. The Duke replied, "Then I would at least like to visit Irene. It won't take long." The butler answered, "She needs to rest. We ask for your kind understanding." The Duke asked, "Is she sick?" He thought to himself, "She looked perfectly fine yesterday." The butler said, "No one can enter the manor when the master isn't here. That's his order." The Duke replied, "We understand." There was a brief confrontation with the guards. Even though it was rude to turn away a high-class noble like the Duke, he stayed calm and even thanked the butler instead of getting angry. The butler asked, "Shall I take you to the clash guards?" The Duke said, "That's fine, I know where they are since I've been there before. But I brought these flowers for Irene. They don't harm anyone, so please deliver them to her." The butler replied, "Understood." He wondered why Lady Irene would turn down a marriage proposal from such a kind duke. Then Aidan said, "I read his mind, and he wasn't lying when he said the Baron was with the guards too. So I don't think Lady Irene is sick." The Duke thought, he can control his power freely now. Then he said, "No one will be able to lie to me if you're around." Aidan replied, "I'm glad I could help." The Duke reflected, "I could have always treated him this way, but I neglected him too much in the past. It wasn't just Aidan I was careless about. I was the same with my wife." The Duke reflected on how he had been cold to her in the past and vowed not to make the same mistake again. He told Aidan, "I think we've arrived. Stay in the carriage. It's better if I meet with Baron alone." Aidan, curious, asked, "Wouldn't it be better if I came with you?" The Duke shook his head. "Baron is a strict person. It's best if I meet him by myself." As the Duke walked away, he thought, "What is going on?" Meanwhile, Irene woke up and realized she had fallen asleep quickly last night. David's words had been strangely comforting, and that must have been why she slept so well. She looked around and asked, "Where did those roses come from?" Mate, the servant, answered, "His Grace visited just now, and asked that these be delivered to you." Irene was surprised. "My goodness, I didn't notice earlier, but there's a black rose in the middle. It must have been extremely expensive. Do you think they accidentally included it?" Mate wasn't sure, but Irene thought to herself, it wasn't an accident. All the thorns were removed, which means it was placed there on purpose. He was never this attentive. Then she suddenly thought, what was that? Irene quickly pushed the thought aside and decided she needed to find her mother. Just as she turned, Morgan called out to her, "What are you doing outside? The monsters appeared out of nowhere. You should hide inside the manor or go to the shelter with the villagers." Irene turned around and noticed the monsters had vanished. She thought, "I'm glad I brought my bow just in case." Morgan looked at her with gratitude. "Thank you, you saved me. When did you learn to shoot a bow?" Irene replied, "I learned a while ago." She then asked, "Are you okay to move right now?" Morgan answered, "My father told me you saved me, thank you." Irene nodded. "Wounds like that can't kill an esper." Morgan seemed curious. "You know a lot about espers." Irene thought maybe I made it too obvious, but then she quickly asked, "Do you know where my mother is?" Just then Irene heard her mother shout, "Hurry up! We need to get all the villagers to the shelter." Irene thought, even though I was shocked and my smile disappeared, she's still looking after the servants first. My mother is truly amazing. Her mother called out to her, "What are you doing? What if you're attacked by a monster? Get back to the manor now." Irene replied, "We don't know when the manor will be attacked. I can't leave you here alone." Her mother insisted, "There's no time to argue, just go." Irene hesitated, wondering why her mother stopped talking. The next moment she thought, a bigger monster appeared. What is it doing here? She quickly realized that even if she tried to hide, it would still find her. People often assumed that bigger monsters were less intelligent, but Irene knew better. The monster let out a loud roar, its terrifying presence drawing in other creatures. Its appetite was fierce enough to devour both humans and monsters alike. Irene couldn't understand why such a monster, one that had appeared in Korea, had now surfaced in the Stern Empire. But if it was truly the same one, they needed to buy time. Regular people wouldn't be able to kill it. Turning to Morgan, Irene said, "Can you do me a favor? Morgan, you need to defeat that monster over there. Don't let a single one get into the shelter." She then looked at her mother and said, "Thank you for always worrying about me, but I'm sorry. I have to do this now because I feel the same way you do. May blessings be with you. I have a duty to protect our villagers and family." Irene knew fighting in her current state was tough, but the training she'd received made her more capable. She thought, "If I fail, I'll fall." Just then, the Duke's voice interrupted her thoughts. "You were always like this, so reckless." Irene looked at him in confusion. "What are you doing here?" The Duke replied, "Protecting one's guide is the duty of an esper." Thanks to the Duke's intervention, the monster wave was quickly suppressed. The Baron, relieved, returned, and the Duke asked, "What am I supposed to do when my father-in-law is a swordmaster?" Irene, still processing, thought, "Father-in-law? But we aren't married yet." She glanced at him, realizing she could return to safety thanks to his help. But then, she wondered if he was using too much of his power. He must have already exhausted a lot in stopping the monsters. The Duke then asked, "Can you give me guiding?" Irene, a little surprised, replied, "Give me your hand." As she guided him, the Duke said, "Thank you, I'm all right now." He then looked at her, his eyes softening as he called her, "Honey." Irene snapped, "Don't call me that." But before she could say more, the Duke kissed her gently, whispering, "Get some rest. You've had a long day." Suddenly Irene spoke, "I hate you," and then kissed him back. The kiss deepened, and Irene thought, "He didn't say anything, but his eyes showed just how desperately he wanted me." She still had no intention of repeating the past, but as time passed, if the Duke agreed, could they become two people who shared a past they couldn't tell anyone else? Maybe, just maybe, she could understand the strange feelings stirring within her. The next day, the Baron spoke. "Your mother told me everything. You fought the monster instead of running? What if something bad had happened? Thank God his grace was around to save you, but I'm so proud of you." Her mother came in shortly after. Irene thought to herself, "I did what I did for my family, for House Clay, and for my parents." The incident had forced them to remember the pain of nearly losing her in the past, but if her family or the citizens were ever in danger again, she would do whatever it took to protect them, no matter who stood in her way. Her mother, looking at her with pride, said, "You did well. I can see how hard you've been training. You were reckless this time, but I'm proud of you for stepping up to protect the family. Don't cry, that was a compliment." The Duke then came over, offering, "Why don't I help you with your skills? Baron and Lord David will be busy dealing with the damage from the monster wave." But her father replied firmly, "It's a generous offer, but I can't trust my daughter with an outsider just because I'm busy. With all due respect, I don't think this is the time for that conversation. As you said, we'll be busy with the aftermath of the monster wave, so we'll send you a formal invitation next time." Irene thought to herself, "I've never seen my father act so stubborn before." It had also been a while since she'd last seen Seal, and he seemed downcast. She asked him, "Were you waiting for us? Are you all right, my lord?" Aidan replied, "I'm fine. It's probably just because there are too many people around." Irene thought, "Just seeing the passers-by makes him turn pale." She then said, "Can you wait for us in the carriage? There's something I'd like to ask His Grace." Aidan agreed. "Okay." Irene turned to the Duke and asked, "Is your brother an esper too? The way he's so overly cautious for no reason is usually a sign of psychological type espers." The Duke, looking a bit surprised, replied, "I knew you'd find out." Irene asked, "Really? But the book never mentioned it." The Duke explained, "It's okay. I became the main lead when I traveled to a different dimension. I also read that book." Irene raised an eyebrow. "You read that book?" The Duke nodded. "Yes, I would read it whenever you fell asleep. Back when we were in Korea, you were reading the book Sen recommended to me, so I also took a look at it. I thought it was popular at the time. The book was based on the Stern Empire, but the story was nonsense. The way Sean appeared in the Stern Empire as the only guide, how I and an esper fell in love with her and tried desperately to make her mine. How I committed treason against the crown prince because I also fell in love with her, and how I met my ultimate death after going rogue. It was all ridiculous. Irene thought to herself, he's never told me this before. Why did Sean recommend this book to Seal as well? It was just a regular book back in Korea. But now the events in the story are actually happening here in Stern. She began to realize that maybe she hadn't considered how much it would hurt Seal if he found out the truth about the book. Was she planning to use it as some kind of prophecy to keep Seal by her side? She never imagined Sean would go as far as to hurt him. If this was true, so maybe that's why Seal couldn't smile around her when they were in Korea, because he had no choice. The Duke then asked, "Who's Sen?" He started laughing, and Irene thought, "Fine, go ahead and laugh." The Duke spoke again. "I'm sorry, it's just, you haven't changed at all." Irene felt a pang. "I thought I changed a lot," she thought, but then said aloud, "Anyway, please take better care of Lord Aiden. In the past, psychological espers were often sent to other countries as spies, or they just disappeared without a trace. That's all I wanted to say. Let's go back." The Duke responded, "I know what you're afraid of, but there's nothing to worry about. This is the Stern Empire, not Korea." Irene thought to herself, his hands are trembling slightly. It's a reminder of how much he cares about me. She realized he was right. This wasn't Korea. But for a brief moment, she felt like she was back there when she saw a monster she recognized from Korea. On top of that, the only known espers here were the Crown Prince and Seal. Why do I keep recalling the past? She wondered. The Duke continued, "I understand you're no longer Suun, and I know why you want to avoid me. But more than anything, I don't want you to keep feeling the pain from what happened in the past. I've also decided to accept that you're Irene now, so you can't keep pushing me away because of what happened before. You're an honorable daughter of House Clash, soon to be a duchess, and I'm just a fool who can't live without her." After that, Irene thought, I decided not to compare Korea and Stern like Seal said, but one question still lingers in my mind. The only saintess mentioned in the book was Ken, so why was I awakened as a guide too? Aiden and Morgan were also awakened as espers. This is just a theory for now, but maybe this place is full of people who were awakened as espers and guidos. But since there's so little information about them here, the espers could have just disappeared without anyone knowing, like Seal did in the past. Besides, I need to remember what Seal said. What am I thinking? What he said has nothing to do with this. Irene found herself lost in thought. What am I thinking? Why am I overanalyzing everything? Just then Morgan came over and asked, "Do you have time? I'd like to talk to you." Irene was curious and asked, "Who's that child?" Morgan replied, "A few hours ago I was helping Uncle Arthur search the CL domain when I met her. I felt the same sensation from her that I felt from you." The child, Rose, spoke up. "Nice to meet you, my lady." Irene suddenly felt an unexpected warmth rush through her. She thought, "Why, do I feel so flushed all of a sudden?" Rose then asked, "Are you okay? Maybe you're feeling sick because of me." Morgan quickly reassured, "No, I'm fine. It's not because of you. Wait, maybe it is." Irene thought, Morgan's reaction confirms my suspicions. She then asked, "Why don't you stay at my manor until things settle down? There are many things I'd like to teach you." Irene realized, this child is a new guide. Meanwhile, Duke was clearly frustrated. "This is too much. I'm not attending this banquet. I have nothing to wear. I should hire a designer soon, or maybe I should go look for one right now." He turned to Aiden and asked, "Are you going somewhere?" Aidan replied, "Yes, I'm meeting Rose." The Duke thought to himself, "She's the new guide I met in CL recently." Duke responded, "Yes, I am meeting her. But don't you think you've been leaving the manor a lot lately?" "I'm just kidding. But seriously, you should bring at least one guard with you when you go outside. You never know what might happen." He worried for Aidan's safety, knowing that Aidan wasn't a physical-type esper. Despite his concerns, Duke knew he couldn't stop Aidan from being drawn to his guide. Aidan then said, "By the way, I have something to share with you that I think you'll like. I can now read Baron's thoughts." The Duke was shocked. "Just a little while ago, you couldn't read the thoughts of high-class espers like me or Irene, or even those of skilled high-class knights." Aidan continued, "Yes, but now I can. I think it's a big step forward." Duke replied, "Congratulations on leveling up. Thanks for letting me know, but honestly, I don't want to hear Baron's thoughts." He added, "Your help could earn me house clothes appreciation and Lady Irene's interest, but I'm sure there's a more honorable way to do that." Duke thought to himself, "I just rambled a bunch of fancy words to Aidan. I'm nervous about what they'll say. Anyway, I can hardly believe there was a monster wave here not long ago. No matter how many times I look at this place, it's still hard to believe. This must be the result of Baron's leadership. In Korea, monster waves were common, but it's been 10 years since the last one in the Stern Empire." Duke couldn't shake the thought that if he had been even a second too late, he would have lost Irene again. The guilt of that possibility haunted him. If that had happened, he thought, I never would have been able to forgive myself. Back when he was in Korea, the Esper and Guide Alliance started demanding increasingly dangerous missions after he married Suan. He'd complained about it, especially as the stakes got higher with time, but the only response he ever got was, "You recently got married, right?" He had to protect his wife. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her like he had lost the Stern Empire. So he kept her at a distance, thinking it was for her own safety. But little did he know, in trying to protect her, he was hurting her. Now, as he thought back on it, he realized how much of a mistake that was. But to Irene, it would probably just sound like an excuse. He hated himself for it. His mind raced with questions. Who exactly is she protecting? Her family? The citizens? Or both? One thing he knew for sure. He was never someone she was trying to protect. It was almost laughable. He found himself feeling jealous of his past self. How interesting, he thought. All I want now is for her to be with me. He couldn't wait to see her again, but he also wondered what would happen if he told House Clash that he wanted to stay with them. Would they accept him? Duke shook the thoughts out of his head. He hadn't even been nervous when he met with His Majesty. But now, as he looked around, he realized something was off. "Where is Irene?" he asked. The Baroness replied, "She's getting some rest right now." Duke asked, "Is she ill?" The Baroness calmly answered, "She's just frail by nature. You don't need to worry." Duke's mind raced again. "In my past life, she was in the Special Forces. I thought she'd be stronger like she was back in Korea. Maybe I should get her some supplements to help with her health." Then the Baroness asked, "Your Grace, is that bouquet for Irene?" Duke snapped out of his thoughts. "Oh, I totally forgot about this," he realized. He replied, "Yes, it is. May I give it to her myself?" The Baroness called for Mary, who came and said, "I'll give it to her, my lord." Duke couldn't help but feel frustrated. "I expected this, but they're acting like I don't have the right to even look at her. This isn't going to be easy." The Baroness spoke again. "We would like to ask you a few questions. Why did you propose to Irene? Is it because she has an ability that supports an esper?" Duke thought, "She's tough, even from the start. No one will believe me if I talk about the past." So he simply replied, "I fell in love with her at first sight." The Baron spoke up, "Is that so? Our Irene is indeed beautiful. Do you know I fell in love with my wife at first sight as well?" The Baroness added, "As you know, noble marriages aren't just about love." Even if your feelings for her are genuine, House Leaport may not accept her. Duke's resolve hardened. No servant has the authority to object to my decision. The Baroness spoke with a heavy heart. Your Grace, I know that my daughter is more beautiful and smarter than anyone, but the world isn't kind to families from the countryside. They might even use the burn scar on the back of her hand to call her incomplete. Duke's expression hardened. I will execute anyone who dares to say such things, he declared. They will be reminded of who I am. The Baroness, however, was still doubtful. Even if you say that, I honestly find it hard to trust everything you're saying. She's my precious daughter, who nearly died as a child, but fought through it and grew into such a bright young lady. She loves her family. More than anything, if you were in my shoes, would you be able to let her go? I'm not ready to let her go yet. Before anyone could respond, David spoke up. I apologize for interrupting, but I have a different opinion. What really matters is whether Irene loves His Grace enough to marry him. The Baroness agreed. Absolutely. I've been thinking about this from my own perspective. The Baron nodded. I understand how you feel, my love. She's our precious daughter. Duke couldn't help but feel that the conversation was taking a turn he hadn't expected, but at least they hadn't outright rejected him. I understand where you're coming from, he said. I'll seek acceptance from Irene directly. Also, please trust me. I won't give up on her. The three of them exchanged whispers. He definitely fell in love with her at first sight, and deeply so. Meanwhile, Irene was lost in her thoughts, wondering if Seal was still talking to her family. Duke entered the room, and he noticed that she hadn't thrown away the bouquet. I thought you would have thrown it out the moment you received it, but you kept it, he remarked. Irene asked, So, how did the conversation with my parents go? Duke responded, Not bad, I guess. Anyway, how are you feeling? Much better now that I've had some rest, Irene replied. So did they approve? She asked. Didn't you come here to ask for my hand in marriage? Duke thought for a moment. Come to think of it, the CL couple only said they would respect your decision. They never said they approved. He stood up quickly. I just realized I have something urgent to do. I'll be right back, so wait for me. Irene raised an eyebrow. Where are you going all of a sudden? She asked. Duke, looking flustered, replied, I completely forgot that His Highness summoned me. Irene shouted, What are you saying? Don't waste your ability on things like that. She thought to herself, I'm the one who's supposed to guide you,